Welcome to the MDwise training presentation on the CLAS standards. This training is part one of a two-part series that will take you through the components of culturally and linguistically appropriate healthcare services. It has been developed for any individual who may directly or indirectly interact with a MDwise member, including all MDwise-employed staff and all MDwise-contracted entities, including but not limited to providers, case managers, customer service representatives, consultants, and contracted vendors. In part one of this two-part series, we will focus on some of the key elements of cultural and linguistic considerations in healthcare. We'll cover the definitions of cultural awareness, the impacts on health disparities, and review some of the federal legislation and mandates that govern the care of our membership at MDwise. Cultural awareness. We must first of all consider the content and makeup of cultural awareness. In our consideration of cultural awareness, we must first consider the question, what is diversity? As defined on this slide, diversity is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements or qualities, variety. Notice that emphasized on this slide is the inclusion of different types of people. Whether these differences be in race, culture, religion, gender, or in personalities or opinions, we all encounter diverse and different types of people in our lives. We can all think about instances where we had to adjust our interactions with persons different than ourselves in order to make our interactions successful. Bullet point number 2, an instance of being composed or differing elements or qualities, an instance of being diverse. Here are the facets that constitute diversity. You can see that they include everything from gender to parental status and geographical location. As you look through them, think about how you might respond differently to a person whose particular facet differs from yours. Next, let's consider the question, what is culture? Essentially, when we think of culture, we are thinking about the behaviors and beliefs that a particular group has. When we think of culture, we think of things like shared values, standards, language, communication styles, an overall way of life. The influences of culture are great because they guide decisions and actions of a group through time, and those decisions include decisions about health care. To build on the previous definitions of diversity and culture, we have cultural competency. The Office of Minority Health defines cultural competency as a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, agency, or among professionals that enables effective work in cross-cultural situations. In this definition, we are the system, the agency, or among professionals that must establish a likeness in our behaviors, attitudes, and policies as we come together to care for the diverse population that makes up the MDwise membership. Every culture has different norms and customs regarding their approach, and these also apply to how they approach health care. Let's review a healthcare example specific to pregnancy to get a better feeling of how different cultural approaches to healthcare can be. Examples of cultural differences. To help explain how multicultural healthcare really can be, we're going to go over a few cultural differences in relation to prenatal care and pregnancy. First, we have Anglo-American. Prenatal care is generally sought. The husband or domestic partner is usually the preferred labor partner. Asian. The patient's birth partner may be her mother-in-law or other female relatives. East Indian. Pregnant Hindu women are often encouraged to eat nuts, raisins, coconuts, and fruit to have a healthy, beautiful baby. Hispanic. Pregnancy is seen as a normal condition, so prenatal care may not be sought. The woman's mother may be the preferred birthing partner. Other examples. Middle Eastern. Patients might not make many preparations for birth. They may be very loud and expressive during labor and delivery. Native American. A female relative may be the birth attendant. Stoicism is encouraged during labor and delivery. Russian. A female relative is often the preferred labor and delivery partner. They tend to have a high pain threshold and stoic attitude. Southeast Asians. They may not give an accurate count of pregnancies because many only count live births. Some Hmong new mothers may want to take home the placenta for burial. Why focus on cultural competency? Cultural competency is important for two reasons. One, because we are seeing increased growth of diverse racial and ethnic communities, which presents opportunities and challenges for healthcare delivery. And two, because it helps ensure that all Americans will receive equal access to quality health care. Nationally, the U.S. Census Bureau is predicting significant changes in our population's demographics, with America becoming considerably older and more ethnically and racially diverse. The non-Hispanic white population is expected to slowly decrease, while the black population is expected to rise slightly. The Hispanic and Asian populations are expected to more than double between now and the year 2060. Blacks and whites are projected to be the two slowest growing demographic groups in the nation. Specific to Indiana, we expect to see the same trend as what is being projected nationally. Effects of culture on healthcare. Now let's further explore the effects of differing culture and their approaches and how it may impact healthcare. As one might guess, culture can affect many aspects of healthcare. As indicated on this slide, a person's culture may influence their health, healing, and wellness belief systems, how illness, disease, and their causes are perceived by the patient, patient's family and community, the behaviors of patients who are seeking health care and their attitudes toward health care providers, the delivery of services by the provider who looks at the world through his or her own limited set of values, which can compromise access for patients from other cultures. Culture can affect how one accesses health care. For example, they might not access health care at all until something happens or the condition is really bad. And some will rely solely on prayer. Oftentimes, these cultures may not perceive the illness as bad as it actually is and end up delaying care to the point that the person is critical. All of us can probably think of examples of that one. Culture might also affect perception of the illness or disease, or even be a culprit for developing a particular set of illnesses. For example, one huge impact culture has on wellness is diet. Some cultures tend to eat foods that are high in carbohydrates, which plays a large role in diabetes. Other cultures eat a lot of red meat or salty foods, which has impact when considering overall heart health. Finally, culture can affect how patients perceive health care and healthcare providers. Healthcare providers' own culture may affect how he or she delivers services, which can in turn affect patients of other cultures. Culture defines how healthcare information is received. Different cultures have varying exposure to health information. Some have limited media exposure, so much of the health information they receive is through word of mouth. Others have low literacy levels, so they are less likely to receive and process health information from written literature. Culture defines how rights and protections are exercised. It also affects what is considered to be a health issue. For example, some cultures don't believe mental illness to be a medical condition, but rather a religious issue. This can prevent a person in this culture from getting the treatment he or she needs and can also make the situation worse by making the person feel as if he or she is an outcast. Culture also defines healthcare information received, rights and protections are exercised, what is considered to be a health problem, how symptoms and concerns about the problem are expressed, who should provide treatment for the problem, and what type of treatment should be given. Culture also defines who a person goes to when they are sick, what type of provider, male or female, etc. What can be discussed with a provider, and who can have that conversation. In some cultures, the man is the family spokesperson. So if something is wrong with his wife or with the wife, the husband is the one who interacts with the provider. Please remember that a treatment that is acceptable for one culture may not be for another. What is disparity? Health disparities are population-specific differences in the presence of disease, health outcomes, or access to health care. When you look through government-supported and medical literature, you find a wealth of documentation on health disparities. Many of these include different race and ethnic groups such as blacks or African Americans, Asians, and Hispanic populations. For example, there is a significant health disparity in congenital heart failure, or CHF, for blacks or African Americans. Let's talk about this a little more, because CHF is one of the state of Indiana's and MDwise's focus for disease management programs. There is significant evidence in the literature that demonstrates that CHF disproportionately affects minorities, specifically blacks or African Americans. So much so that it is a major public health problem in the black or African American population. It is more common, affecting approximately 3% of all black or African American adults. This reflects a 50% higher incidence of CHF in the Black or African American population than is seen in the general population. It is not well understood why, but possibly because Black or African American patients are more likely to have hypertension and diabetes mellitus than non-Blacks. Also, once the diagnosis is made, CHF progresses more rapidly in Black or African Americans than in white or Caucasian patients, as evidenced by a higher risk of initial and recurrent hospitalizations. It is felt that deficiencies in cardiovascular risk factor evaluation and disease detection and treatment, as well as access to quality outpatient care, may contribute to the increased incidence and morbidity of Blacks or African Americans with CHF. When studying health disparities, we find many different causes at the root of the variation in outcomes. It is generally accepted, however, that these disparities come about as a result of three main areas. These areas include the different characteristics of different racial and ethnic groups, barriers that are in place, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that are encountered in the healthcare delivery system, and the differing levels of quality received by the different groups when they access the healthcare system. Here are some specific items that contribute to the disparities in access to health care that might be seen. Lack of insurance coverage, lack of a regular source of care, lack of financial resources, legal barriers, structural barriers, the healthcare financing system, scarcity of providers, linguistic barriers, health literacy, lack of diversity in the healthcare workforce. On this slide, we have outlined the conditions the federal government has targeted for research, education, and action in the area of health disparities. These include cancer, cardiovascular disease, infant mortality, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, child and adult immunizations. Federal legislation. While we are talking about the federal government and what it thinks is important to consider, let's review some of the federal legislation that affects this area of healthcare and cultural competency and linguistically appropriate healthcare services. There are three key regulations that we will want to consider in our review of cultural competency and linguistically appropriate healthcare. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Limited English Proficiency, or LEP. The Civil Rights Act is pretty important to MDwise and its members. Title VI of the Act affords protection to MDwise members against discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in any programs or activities that receive federal dollars. This includes Medicaid. Of particular note It also empowers federal agencies to terminate funding or sanction a program that is found to have violated Title VI. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 does for disabilities what the Civil Rights Act does for race, color, and national origin. It protects against discrimination for qualifying individuals while affording the federal government avenues to punish those who receive federal dollars should they fail to uphold the content of the law. The limited English proficiency, otherwise known as LEP in the industry, is the newest of federal elements that affect how we as a health plan offer services to our membership. The particular piece that affects us is an executive order that protects those who have limited ability to speak and understand English as they access services overseen by federal agencies. Standards. Next, we will review the standards that affect MedWise in this area of healthcare considerations. In 2000, the Office of Minority Health issued 14 standards of culturally and linguistically appropriate services. These standards were reviewed and revised beginning in 2010, and new standards were released in 2013. The CLAS standards were developed to ensure that all people entering the healthcare system receive equitable and effective treatment in a culturally and linguistically appropriate manner. In part 2 of this series, MedWise will cover how it specifically approaches each of the 14 standards so that you can best understand and participate in the delivery of these standards to MedWise membership. Finally, additional standards have been developed by NCQA. NCQA is an accrediting body that accredits health plans in every state, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. These plans cover 109 million Americans, or 70.5% of all Americans enrolled in health plans. MedWise is one of these plans. NCQA has taken information from the Office of Minority Health, the National Quality Forum, recommendations from the Institute of Medicine, and created a set of multicultural healthcare standards that support its multicultural healthcare distinction product. This slide concludes part 1 of the MedWise culturally and linguistically appropriate healthcare services. Please join us for part 2, which will walk you through how MedWise is approaching the CLAS standards and your role in contributing to the culturally and linguistically appropriate healthcare services provided to MedWise members. Thank you.